Welcome to Hey Listen, where we discuss faith, leadership, and the mission of the church. We're so glad you've joined us. Now to today's episode.
Well, Austin, welcome to our podcast. Glad you're with us today. And once again, I get to visit with someone without Kayla here. I'm going to miss her being here because, you know, Austin, she's more fun.
That's fair.
Than all of us. But I've got the assignment today to talk with you. And so the Hey Listen podcast is going to hear a little bit about college ministry and hear about Austin Gober. So that's what we want to do. Let's just jump right in. Won't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be called to ministry and ended up here at Ridgecrest. So let's just hear your story for a little bit.
Yeah. Austin Gober. Nice to meet you.
Hey, yeah, good to meet you too.
So I grew up right outside of Nashville, Tennessee. And grew up outside of Nashville. Didn't really go to church very much growing up. Family kind of went off and on. Became a believer at 16 at Fuge Camps. Shout out Lifeway. And not sponsored though. And so became a believer at 16. Started going to a church, every Sunday, every Wednesday. Didn't necessarily know everything. But when I went to college at Middle Tennessee State University, got connected with a college ministry, got connected with college pastor Dwayne Geib. And Dwayne basically sat me down and said, "Do you really want to know what it's like to follow Jesus and walk with Jesus?" I said, "Absolutely." And so we met pretty much every week for 10 years until I moved up here. Sometimes those conversations where I would just bring him notebooks. Dwayne, I don't understand. Like, what's this Trinity thing about? Like, I kind of get it, but I don't get it. And then over time, it's, Dwayne, how do I lead a Bible study? Dwayne, how do I, preach a sermon? Dwayne, what does it mean to be a husband in a Christ-honoring relationship? Dwayne, how do I apply for jobs at churches? And now I call him and we just catch up on life. And
so I know this is kind of putting a pause on your story, but I just love when I hear a story about discipleship that isn't like standardized, right? Yeah. Sounds very organic.
Yeah. There's models out there that are like you meet for 18 months and then you're sent out. Dwayne has never been like that. He fully believes in, we're going to continue to meet and you're going to continue to grow. I expect you to go and do this for somebody else. Okay. But that doesn't mean we have to stop meeting.
Intentionally relational, very practical, meeting needs as they come up, letting the person, so the curiosity of the individual and where that person feels that God is leading them. There's I don't know, I really like that. It's, I think discipleship, we really make it way more complicated than it should be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So he's near and dear to our hearts. Our first dog was named after Dwayne. So so Katie and I met at MTSU after a long saga of will they, won't they. Finally ended up starting to date and got married. And during my time in college, I progressively felt more and more called towards ministry. Didn't really know what that meant. I started college as a history major, switched to psychology, thought I'd be maybe a counselor or a therapist. And, I had no idea what jobs were in ministry. I knew of a senior pastor. I knew of a youth pastor, but I didn't feel particularly called to either of those. And then meeting Dwayne, I got to find out about this world of college ministry. And so combined with my experiences and how transformative it was for me. And like, I truly feel alive in a college atmosphere, in a college town. Like there's just so much potential. It's so exciting to me. So that made me want to pursue ministry. Katie and I got married, so I had to pay some bills there for a little while and go to school. So I had some other jobs, but eventually started working at the church that we were at in college. And then found out about our little baby girl, Adeline, and Katie's family's up here in Missouri. So started looking for jobs up here in Missouri. And then, hey, Ridgecrest is hiring.
Yeah, so we found Austin during COVID. So the very first time I met you was on a video. Watched the video that you sent the team because back in those days, even an in-person meeting was not really practical.
Yeah. Probably a little bit after COVID. I think I started 2023.
Okay, I know the interview process and like the process was during COVID.
I came up one time. Everything before that was phone calls, videos, filling out, some questions and answers.
I was listening to your interview driving to Disney World.
Yeah.
That's what I remember. We were on vacation. We had the kids in the car. We were heading south, and that was my first interaction with Austin. I was listening to you answer questions on video, and I wasn't watching the video and driving. I was listening.
Good.
Yeah, I was listening. Not watching.
That's fair.
So,
and I kind of move around weirdly, so that probably helped me.
Yeah, we were talking about Rocky, this new creature. Right. You kind of remind me of him. You kind of have the same angular weirdness.
Yeah. Does the little.
You have to see that movie, podcast watchers, and see what you think.
Also not sponsored.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. Tell me if you think Austin is Rocky. But anyway, moving on. So you got here, and I remember one of the things, just from my part, just to talk about that time. The Lord had really laid on my heart that with all of the college kids in our community, we have multiple colleges. How many? 5 in the general vicinity?
4 major ones. And then, you've got kind of pop up little things, but
sure. But so 4 major colleges, a big student population here. We're on the south side of Springfield, so we're not like in the middle of all that. Most of those campuses are north of us. But we have always sort of had a little bit of college ministry going on just because we're in Springfield. And we saw an opportunity for evangelism and really having a more focused apologetic towards the campuses, and I think that's one of your strengths, So tell us a little bit about that, how you see your ministry in terms of apologetics. I think that's an important thing for us to talk about here.
Yeah, the way I think about it, most college campuses, it's going to vary depending on your region and kind of the history of what ministries have been able to do on that campus. But what I think I'm seeing right now in this generation in our area, I go to, say, MSU. I think there's about 25% of the students are very spiritually enthusiastic. There's 25% that are kind of lukewarm. Maybe they've been raised in church and they're somewhat familiar, but not really sure if that's going to be a priority. 25% that may be some level of spiritually curious. 25% that are absolutely not. I know I'm nothing, related to spirituality at all. And so the way I see it is, man, that's really only 25% are locked in.
Right.
The 75% are the ones that they need to know why this matters and how it impacts them, not just in eternity, but also in the here and now. So the way that I think about it is, yes, like I've got to go to campus. Like we have to go to campus and meet people where they're at. Like I don't think the build it and they come model necessarily works. Yeah. So, I've made it a habit to regularly go to campus and try to do different outreach things. Sometimes it's, just a nice thing like we're handing out coffee or Pop-Tarts. Other times it's a little bit more deeply evangelistic thing, a sign that says, what is truth, or how do we know truth is real? Something like that, trying to engage people.
Right. And you and I have had a lot of conversations. I think it would be good for people to overhear this conversation about the difference of a campus like MSU, or even to some extent Drury, but specifically MSU, how a lot of the students that go to a school like this are relatively local. And you had a similar situation at Middle Tennessee University. They're similar in that regard.
Yep.
And then there's the other extreme, which would be like a big major state school like Mizzou, if someone were to go to Mizzou and move away from their family and be completely, on their own for the first time. So in my family, I had one kid that went away to school in Chicago all by herself, needed everything, spiritual community of every sort. And then my other child stayed local and still had still had his church family, still had his regular routines. So talk a little bit about how, you're being at Middle Tennessee and doing some ministry there in your formative ministry experiences, and then coming here, and talk a little bit about though what because I would hope that other people, if they're thinking about maybe being a university college pastor, they need to think in both ways. Like where do I fit better? Would I fit better in a MSU type environment, or say a Mizzou environment?
Yeah, I think you've got schools like I'm thinking Big Ten, SEC, like these major schools that it's kind of like a destination school.
Right. Yep.
Right. And then you've got more like state schools, local schools that people are going to because of logistics or convenience or cost.
Right.
Right. And so Middle Tennessee State and Missouri State, very similar schools, like almost identical in terms of enrollment, almost identical in terms of kind of like the type of student that's going there. And so it is very interesting, the similar things that you run into with both schools. MTSU, MSU, not a ton of just fervor for I'm a university of, or Missouri State University alum or right. And so I think that impacts like people's excitement going into a lot of things. You're trying to drum up some natural excitement. The type of student that goes to those different schools, typically a more reserved, more logistically minded kind of student, those kind of factors. But I think there are students that exist in any kind of school. And at the end of the day, all students need to know Jesus. So I don't necessarily think people need to say, I can't work at this kind of school. It's more so you have to know the different problems and the different kinds of environments.
Yeah, I think it's more about your angle. I agree 100%. Like if you're called to care for college students, the problems are going to be, for the most part, the same problems. And I think really it's just that scientific, materialistic worldview that are, even in primary and secondary education, most kids are coming, even if they were raised in church, they really think more like a secular materialist than they would, say, a theist. Yep. And so even though that 50% you were talking about that aren't locked in, but have spiritual thoughts, they're probably thinking more like an agnostic than they are a theist.
Absolutely.
And so I would say that's pretty, and this is a really simple way to look at it. But I think that you can tell what kind of school you're at, like if it's a destination school or not, by the size of the bookstore and the merch. So we were on the campus of Notre Dame 2 weeks ago. They have a 2-story bookstore, and it had more Fighting Irish merch than I've ever seen in my life. So that's a destination school.
Right.
And then you go to MSU and there's like, it's not that big. It's not that big of a bookstore. So, you can just kind of tell like that everything there is about football, and it's, and it's a big marketing kind of thing. And there's nothing wrong. To me, I see a lot of people go to schools like that because it's like a dream, but they get lost in all of that. Whereas I think a lot of the kids that go to like an MSU, they're really more locked into to getting a job, more locked into thinking on what's next. I think there's a practicality there. Yeah. And I'm so thankful. We don't want to say, oh, one's really good and one's really bad. No, actually, I've seen a lot of value in the schools here, keeping people here, giving them the opportunity to not go into a lot of debt. Man, a lot of these students are getting out of school and they're not able to really function because of so much college debt. But, here in Springfield, we just decided as a church in Springfield that we needed to be more intentional about reaching those kids and providing their needs. And so just tell us a little bit about the ministry here at Ridgecrest, because we're 15 minutes from 20 minutes from MSU. Yeah. So the average student that moves into a dorm there is probably not going to find their way to Ridgecrest like naturally. Right. I mean, we're going to have to reach out to them and bring them here if that's the case. But so what does college ministry look like at Ridgecrest Baptist Church? Yeah.
So what I've done is we've kind of centered our schedule and our rhythm around 3 main things that we do every week. Sunday we have service here at Ridgecrest. For college ministry, we've done some different things. Where we kind of landed right now is fall semester, we kind of do like a Christianity 101 class for incoming students. Basics of the faith, some basic theology, spiritual disciplines, like what does it mean to be a Christian, basically.
Okay.
Spring semester, with those new students, what we do is kind of take them through a balance of a leadership and theology class 1 week, and then the next week, go practice serving in some area.
Okay.
And so our older students, we try to encourage them on Sunday to basically serve for 1 hour and then attend service for the other hour. I think that's a huge importance for me, that what we see in healthy believers is that they have a gifting to serve somewhere and they need to exercise that gifting. It helps to realize that this is a body that works together and serves one another.
That's good.
So that's been a really big encouragement. I think we've seen some neat fruit from that just in the lives of our students, but also in how they've interacted in some of these other areas, create some intergenerational opportunities. That's neat. And then Tuesday nights, we do our college worship night that we call Gathering. It's pretty standard worship night, worship music, I'll teach, and then some sort of activity or just kind of hang out afterwards. I just try to make the series. Fall semester, we usually go through a book. We went through the entire book of Romans this fall. That was a little daunting. I don't know if I'll do that again.
It's a lot.
And then spring semester, we usually start off with a topical series. So last year it was like love and dating. This year it was just some like apologetics questions, like why is there so much suffering? Okay. And now we're about to do Book of Jonah. And then we have on campus or just around town small groups that are student led. They're focused on just building community with each other, holding each other accountable, and applying what we've heard in the sermon that week.
Okay. So I've heard of a couple of recent events where we've had like children's ministry events or even some church-wide events that are all hands on deck kind of stuff, and people talking about they feel the presence of these college students and the contributions they're making, not just showing up, but being involved and really participating. One memory I have, it's so sweet, is we had a group of college kids that did a car for the trunk or treat, and several of them actually, and they were just all in. They were not only helping us set up and do all of that, and our older people who are consistent and usually involved in these things, I think they saw that and were impressed. And then just last week we had Kayla did the skate that she does for the kids, and a big group of the college kids were there and enjoying it and visible. And that's the thing. We've always had college students here, but those college students now are starting to be more visible and engaged in the life and ministry of the church. And so that's really exciting, because I do think that one of the things, not only if you build it, they will come, but also a lot of college ministries become kind of an entity to themselves. And I think that it's better to, in every sense, to have that intergenerational mix and to get things kind of mixed up that way, and building relationships. I think that a lot of college students, especially if they move into an area, one of the hardest things that for them is to build healthy relationships outside of just their college context. Yeah.
My goal that I say for our students is I want you to graduate understanding what it means to be a fully formed disciple of Jesus. And I think that means all of those, I call it almost like kingdom rhythms, like being a part of a body of Christ, being in community, worshiping regularly, serving regularly, and understanding that you're supposed to go out into the community and share that same thing. So I think for me, I could build a ministry that's just attractional and just, come here and we're just going to get as many numbers as we can. But I just so much want to set up people for the next 40 years of their life, 50 years of their life, so that they can go into churches and be healthy, productive, thriving members of local churches and understand what that means.
Well, with our last 10 minutes here, I want to just let people know, Austin is our college pastor, and that's what we brought him here for. But as we've got to know him, you have some really good administrative gifts, a lot of really good at strategy. Austin's the kind of guy, when I ask him for something, I get a a mini dissertation. Like my inbox is filled with things, and usually 10, 15 pages. So you're killing me, man. But I love that about you, that you're thinking through every angle and very good at that. And so when we brought you here, I was so impressed. I think the thing that really grabbed my heart was your gifts of evangelism and just your intentionality in apologetics, which we've already kind of touched on. But you're kind of like an armchair philosopher, historian. You kind of, you dabble in a lot. So I think that's why I like you so much. I love you so much, because you're kind of always thinking and looking for what's out there. So one of the things I'd like you to talk a little bit about is, of all of our people on staff, I don't think anybody messes around with AI as much as you. You've come in my office with some funny stuff that you've developed or figured out. So not to be funny, not to talk about some of those things, because they're hilarious, but the songs that you that you made, what was it? You had a song that was based on one of my sermons or something like that. What was that?
Oh man, I've made so many. We came back from Etch one year. I made a whole album cover for Nick, former Next Gen pastor. That he was a rap artist. It was incredible. Oh yeah,
I mean, it can do some crazy stuff. But let's talk practically for a moment. People my age and older we remember the movie Terminator, so we just assume AI is going to kill us all. So a lot of older folks are just automatically thinking it's a bad thing. And when you listen to some of the really smart, highest up tech people, they're scared of it too. They do see that there's potential for terrible things. But man, Austin, the things you've shown me and the little bit I've dabbled in it, AI is such a powerful tool for research. And I think the robots are saved. I think, here's what I'm saying. Like, when you ask it a question about God, it's giving an answer that's usually pretty straight up right. Like what you would get from a top flight theologian if you were to ask them a question like that. So tell me how you see AI being incorporated into the ministry of the church. Because this generation that you're discipling right now, AI is going to be hand in glove. It's just who they are.
Yeah.
They're dealing with it in school. They're having to, interact with it in academia. What does it look like in a few years, 5 years, 10 years from now? How is AI going to change how we do ministry?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's a tool, right? Just like anything else. I mean, I remember way long ago growing up and them talking about, you'll never have a calculator in your pocket the whole time. Well, now we do. But it's a tool, right? I think the biggest thing with AI that everyone, whether it's a student, whether it's a pastor, needs to be thinking of is discernment. How do we wisely use this in a responsible way where we're not overly reliant, but we're using it in a way that's practical and helpful, and that we have the ability to discern, is this taking me down a bad path? There's some really interesting studies about over-reliance on AI and how it, what it does to our brain, and just lessens our ability to critically think. But man, used in the right way, you can do some incredible stuff. I mean, you talked about all the examples, but I think it's a really powerful tool that you can use for any number of things. Right.
And, the thing about it is that, for years, I can remember back when, before Google, there were a couple different websites that would try to crunch all the data and give you thousands, millions even of hits. But maybe the first few, there was a couple relevant hits, but the majority of the hits were random. And you could tell it was just a matter of a computer brain finding things that match and then just say, does this help? Well, no, it doesn't. Whereas now the difference is that there's thought, there's rationality, and that rationality is very human, and it'll even use human, like slang words. Like it's so funny. It'll use language that's not non-technical, but it's for the most part very helpful. And so what you're saying is that if the church will utilize the tool, and as I understand it, you can kind of conform the AI to sort of fit your context.
I've built custom models. It sounds way fancier.
No, I know, but talk about that because that's important.
So I mean, I've built custom models for the different a variety of tasks that I do. So right now I'm working on some data analytics from spreadsheets, kind of looking at some long-term trends with our church and just how a bunch of variables go together.
Right.
And so what I'm able to do is create a custom agent that says, okay, I want you to be an expert in Excel and data analytics, and basically take someone who has a master's degree in data analytics and build that person to look at my spreadsheets. Or I've got like a Baptist historical theologian custom agent that says, okay, I want you to be an expert in typical Baptist thought. Here's this question: how would some of these huge figures in Baptist theology answer that question?
Yeah,
college ministry, same
so
stuff.
The computer can read everything. For instance, let's say, how would Spurgeon answer this question?
Yep.
So the computer reads everything that Spurgeon ever wrote that's accessible online, and then crunches that, and then can speak with a voice that's completely Spurgeon's, and do it well.
Yeah.
So like when you're writing a major paper in academics, let's say you are writing on Spurgeon, you're reading everything you can of his, and you're trying to say, imagine being able to read everything in a nanosecond, to crunch all that data and then to answer the question. That's why I was joking when I said I think AI is saved. The only reason it seems that way is because it is able to like weed out, like you would in a paper, like, okay, I don't need all of this, but the main thing I need is right here. Every single time it seems like it's giving you the essentials. And so the reason I wanted to bring this up is because church in a decade is just going to be very different, not just because of AI. It's because the world is always changing, and it's changing fast. And I think that men like you, Austin, that are able, you're right at that age where you kind of understand the world that I came from, but you're also looking into this world of the college student. And I think that we need men like you to really help us to get ready for this next 5 to 10 years. And I think you're doing a great job here. And so I wanted people to hear just a little bit about that, because when we talk about you being a college pastor, yeah, you do that, but there's so many other things that you're doing here at Ridgecrest that I think are helping us to get ready, because our next gen team goes from babies all the way to the college age. We really are intentional about that entire long span up to 21 years of age. And you just happen to be at the end of that journey. But what you're doing is you're really setting us up, I think, to have some wonderful leaders and some very, very deep Christians in their 20s and 30s. And so that's really exciting. And here at Ridgecrest, I think in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see all the people you're discipling right now are going to be great leaders at Ridgecrest and great leaders for the kingdom. So Austin, thank you for visiting with us. And hopefully we can have you back sometime. Maybe we can talk a little bit more about this AI stuff.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. God bless you.
Thank you again for joining us today. We'll see you next time on Hey Listen.